Well, good evening, everyone. People checking into our live feed and a little bit of an introduction here. And hopefully you can hear everything okay. We're looking forward to a good hour that we can spend talking about DBR Ministries. So I know some other people will be joining in, so it's just kind of a welcome and talk about the fact that this presentation is in lieu of our annual banquet that we have. And let me pause for just a second. Thanks. Just shutting the door. In March of each year, we hold a banquet for the DBR Ministries to raise support, talk about testimonies, talk about what we've done in the past year, what we're going to do in the year coming up. And last year, we had our banquet in the first week of March, and we had 150 people who attended. We had a great event, had some testimonies, and it was just a wonderful night. And within a week, less than a week later, the CDC ordered or issued directives, I should say, suggestions of groups no bigger than 50. And so we felt pretty blessed that a day that we chose back in December that turned out to be perfect as far as our ministry and having our dinner and being able to move forward with the rest of the year. And so we're hoping that in 2022, we'll have a dinner again, a banquet. We have an international cuisine at our banquets where we have food from the countries, both inside the U.S., of course, and outside. We will have some Filipino dishes, some Central American dishes from Nicaragua and Belize, where we serve there. And since we have a history of serving in Russia, we also have some Russian dishes that we serve. And so we really enjoy that and look forward to having the event. So for this year, instead of doing nothing, we decided to do a live feed. I have some testimonies, people that have written the impact that our ministry has had on them this year. And so I'll be able to share those with you. I have an update from some things in the foreign mission field, even though we were not able to go in 2020 because of the pandemic. The seeds that we planted on former trips have they're borne fruit, and I want to be able to share those with you as well. So just a brief background on our ministry. DBR stands for Death, Burial, and Resurrection. Comes from 1 Corinthians 15:3-4, that says, I delivered unto you first of all that which I also received, how that Christ died according to the scriptures, and that he was buried, and that he rose again on the third day. Let's pray. Lord, I thank you for your death, burial, and resurrection. I thank you for what our ministry represents, how you bless it, and how you've used it. I pray that through this presentation that you will be glorified in what you've done through our ministry in places that we've been to before, and you continue to bless those efforts, and how you used us domestically this year to help a lot of people in this country. I pray that you'll be honored by everything that we talk about through this presentation. Thank you for the technology that gives us this opportunity. In Jesus' name, amen. Amen. So a couple of things to share that were blessings in the ministry this year, just kind of in a general sense. I got a text in December of last year from a family that we've helped who supported us. And it was just a general text saying, we really appreciate your ministry. Is there anything that you need? And I thought about, donations and things that we do on an ongoing basis. But I thought about it for a second, and I prayed about it, asked the Lord, I say, how do I answer this? And the thought came to my mind that our ministry van had about 220,000 miles on it, and not sure how much longer it was going to last. It had for several years. and just relayed back to them that if there was anything that they could do to help us with a van, that'd be greatly appreciated. And nothing expected. Is certainly just letting the need be known. And the response was, "We will donate a van to your ministry." And so we were extremely grateful for that response. And the family said, "Just give us some time. We'll work it out. We'll get to it. We'll be right away." And we said, "Sure, no problem. We're good. Everything's great." A couple months later, I believe it was several weeks at least, was contacted and they said, "We have something for you, and just arrange the day to go ahead and pick it up." And so we got a van that's it's really nice. We're extremely grateful for it, and what a blessing to our ministry. And to make a long story short, on the other part, uh, 3 days later, the engine went out in our old van, literally 3 days after we picked up the new van. And as my wife and I were sitting on the side of the road waiting for the tow truck, we were just grateful to the Lord, grateful to his family for how he used them to bless our ministry. And so he knew what was coming. We did not. And we're very grateful for that, and certainly want to acknowledge that blessing that we received. The other thing that's, I don't know if so much a blessing, but just God working. We had a board member of our ministry. His name's Greg Cox, and Greg been involved in our ministry for a number of years. He was on our board of directors, and Greg passed away last year after a struggle with health and with cancer. And back in August, when he first found out that he was not going to recover, him and I spent a couple hours on the phone talking. And in that conversation, they agreed that I would try to come out to California and officiate his funeral, and certainly share the gospel at his funeral. And so we agreed that we would try to do that. And through supporters of DBR, we were able to put together the support needed to make that trip, when it happened. And so, Greg went to hospice, and he spent several weeks on hospice. And then in the late part of November, after Thanksgiving, he began to fail in his health, and within a short time was with the Lord. And then decisions were made about when to do the funeral and when not, and the family being guided, and they made the decision to do it sooner rather than later. And so I was able to go out there. So here's the, I don't know the important point, but God's timing is, as I was leaving in the San Francisco airport, I was looking at the monitors and listening to announcements that said anybody coming in had to quarantine mandatory for 10 days as I'm leaving. And which means that if I would have come any time later, it would have almost been impossible to be able to go. And as it was, I was able to go. I got to spend time with his family, with his wife and daughter, and minister to them and talk with them, and be present at the funeral and speak on Greg's behalf. And it was just a blessed event. And so I thank the Lord for his timing and everything. We look at it and we know that he chose when it was Greg's time to go home. And we're very grateful for that, and thankful for Greg and for his service to our ministry. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about our foreign missions for a little bit, and then I'll get to our domestic missions, kind of give a foreign missions update. In regards to, and excuse me for continuing to look away, but I'm going to read some stuff. Tom and Alita Sharp are a couple that are missionaries in Belize. They've been there over 10 years, more than 10 years, under DBR Ministries as full-time missionaries in Belize. And so I want to read to you their latest newsletter. They said, on Monday, 22nd of February, Alita arrived at the Belize airport after spending several months in the States. She was helping her mother after the passing of her father after 63 years of marriage. There was an opportunity to serve Mama and the family during her adjustments to life as a widow. Alita returned to writing devotionals, her blog, counseling appointments, board meetings, and then I guess Tom wrote this because he said, and making Tom some cookies. So Tom enjoyed that, of course. But yes, Alita had a couple members of her family pass away, and it was a difficult time for their family. And very fortunate that with the COVID restrictions and airports closing, that she was able to go and be with her family. She was actually in the States when this took place. And so again, you see God's timing and his hand in taking care of those who are out taking care of others in the mission field. It goes on to say Alita also continues her schooling with her final two classes this semester at Fort Hays State University. She will finish her bachelor's degree in May that she started over 20 years ago. So I know she's very excited about that. This year has been very busy for Tom with CDF, and I'll talk a little bit more about CDF in a minute, but that's the Child Development Foundation of Belize. It says, while he's not counseling clients at CDF, he's been working under UNICEF, under a UNICEF grant, by teaching half-day family violence workshops via Zoom. To date, Tom has completed 6 training sessions with various groups in the Orange Block District. Additionally, Tom has led 3 virtual parenting sessions for parents of high schoolers in Belize City and Belmopan. And then there's just a last comment about the culture there. School in Belize has been 100% online, and the country won't start physically attending school until August or September at the earliest, depending on the COVID condition. And so he remarks by saying kudos to the kids who have worked hard at completing studies online for a year. So just a little insight into what's going on there. There's been some COVID restrictions. Again, I mentioned the airport opening and closing different times, so travel is restricted, and that also had a big impact on our 2020 plans to go and continue construction work on we call the Rescue and Rehabilitation Center for Women. And we tried not to use the term, but the easiest term to understand it is it's in generic terms, it's a safe house. But the director of CDF tries to steer away from that term, and so we honor that. But that's what we've been working on for a while. We've taken several construction trips to Belize in order to work on it. We had one planned, and we had a partnership developed with Napa Valley Life Church and Pastor Tony Valente, and they formed a missions group with some people I know from when we were part of that church, many years ago, 20 years ago, and people that have a heart for missions, and their youth leader and their music leader, they're all involved in it. They want to be involved in something like that type of project. And so they had a dinner planned, and they had promoted it, and they were going to raise the funds. And then I was going to go and lead a team to do the construction. I had my plane ticket. We were ready, and we were supposed to go in April of last year. And of course, the pandemic brought that all to a grinding halt. And so we're on hold with it. We have not abandoned the idea. The passion is still there. The drive is still there. And so as soon as things open up, the church will resume putting together the banquet, raising the funds, and we'll look at going again. I was able to get a credit on my plane ticket that I can use and repurchase. So we're just basically on hold, and we are certainly not done. So we're going to continue working on that in Belize. I want to shift over to Nicaragua, because in 2019, we had our first chance to go teach seminars, teach addiction seminars. The book, 7 Things Addiction, was translated into Spanish. We had those for the pastors and Christian leaders who were sponsored. So when people sponsor a pastor through our ministry, it provides the seminar, the food, it provides a book, a syllabus, everything for that pastor. And we've been able to do that for $25 per pastor. And so it really makes it reachable for anybody to sponsor, one or more. And we've had people take advantage of that and sponsor quite a few pastors. So look at my notes here. We did that in coordination with an organization called Kingdoms Connections Nicaragua, which is founded and led by Pastor Harrison Gonzalez. And I am actually on the board of that ministry in Nicaragua. We were brought together by the ministry of Pastor Dave and Pam Waters, and their International Gospel Initiative, and they do work in Nicaragua. Pastor Dave is one of my former pastors. He wrote the foreword to the Addictions book. And so through our continuing ministry relationship and personal relationship, I met Pastor Gonzalez, Pastor Harrison. And so anyways, eventually I became part of the board of his organization. So we partnered in 2019 and we had the addiction seminar, um, one in Managua, one in Matagalpa, which is more to the east in Nicaragua. And over 500 pastors attended those two events. The one in Managua was right about 360 pastors alone. So it was one of the biggest event that we've ever hosted. And so the other thing that happened there was I had drafted a set of guidelines for holding a support group. And I did this actually for the Philippines a couple years back. And it includes a guide for the meeting. It includes a very extensive leader's guide to help them understand what they need to know about running a support group, knowing about addictions, how to properly do a support group. And I'm going to explain properly because I'm not talking about just the way it is in America, and I'll explain that in a second. But to actually to know effective support group dynamics. And so I had that all drafted. There was a one page that had the 12 steps and the 12 scriptures side by side as a regular reading for the meeting. So it's a complete package. And what we were able to do was get that translated into Spanish. When I was there in 2019, I had two different sessions where we did nothing but just teach what those were, what those guidelines were, to a couple of different groups, trying to plant the seeds for something to continue after I left. We don't want to just have a seminar, provide books and training, and then nothing comes of it. We need it to continue, and we need it to be available, especially since we haven't been able to go back. So here's the great news. And let me back up just a second because I said I would explain something. You can't just take something that works in America, go plant it in a foreign country, and expect that it's going to work exactly the same. I've seen that before. I picked up on that in my early missions work in Russia, and I learned to adapt. Learn the culture, find something that works when the things don't work. And so one of the things that I found was that you can't just bring people into the room like we do in America, say at a 12-step meeting, and you read a couple things and everybody starts sharing. They don't have that foundation. They don't have that depth of experience. And so these were all being done through churches. So what I wrote was a combination of a Bible study and a support group with a clear transition from the Bible study to the support section, meaning you could have some general discussion about the Bible part you're reading in the Bible study. But when you get to the support group, you pick up those dynamics of only one person shares at a time. You don't give advice. You don't crosstalk. You don't have conversation going on. It's just sharing from the heart. And so it's half and half. And this seems to work very well. So let me read for you something that Pastor Harrison wrote recently about what they've been able to do with it. And I'm just going to read it as he wrote it. So if it's a little bit of broken English, I didn't try to fix it. This is from his heart. He said, God be blessing you, brother. Thank you, your partner, prayers, brother. Things have not been easy, but in the midst of everything, God has been good and faithful. At the moment, we have 3 recovery groups. We are using the DBR recovery manual, one in Managua and 2 in another town about 20 kilometers from Managua. We have a total of 20 people in our groups. We had 5 groups that were the fruit of pastors who attended the conference, but after the pandemic, the churches and groups closed. In these months, the church are reopening, and he's talking about currently. We are praying so that everything goes back to normal in the country. So meaning those 5 groups could restart very easily once things open up. He says, of course, the conference was very helpful. It opened the minds of the pastors to a new idea. And that new idea was an approach to addiction and alcoholism that isn't just one-step delivery, instant deliverance, the fact that the Bible teaches a process of deliverance. And so that was what their minds were opened up to. He goes on to say, brother, the good thing is that now we have a new idea how to support from the churches to pass the message through those who have left drugs and alcohol. And so what he's talking about is that when people come to churches and they're quitting drinking and drugs and they're trying to ask for help, they had a history of not doing very well with those people and not retaining them. And he's saying that now they feel that they have a better chance of working with the people. He says, I'm happy because 2 months ago I started a recovery group. I started with 2, now we are 8. Every week we are growing. Last week we opened a group in another city and we are growing. So I hope you're hearing the multiplication of the ministry here. I will continue to pray that God gives you the opportunity to come back and be able to help more pastors to treat and help people enslaved to alcohol and drugs. We want another conference. I know we need it. Remember that you have a friend to serve you in Nicaragua, signed Harrison. And so, as you can see, the work that we did is truly bearing fruit. Certainly the mention of 3 groups that are continuing, 5 that started and may restart, and then he's got another 2 that are starting. And as people come and we've seen this in Russia, where once people begin to come and they begin to be ministered to, it multiplies. It starts out like addition and then it multiplies. And so we're very happy to hear that that's taken place. Direct result of all of you as supporters of our ministry. And so, it's not just me going there, it's you being a part of it and knowing that the support that you put into DBR, we've taken to the mission field and planted those seeds and we're bearing fruit. So we're just extremely excited about that. Very excited. I'm going to talk about the Philippines for a second. So in 2019, again, we spent 2 weeks in Manila, conducted 4 seminars. We did this in partnership with Baptist Bible College Asia and a ministry called Global Surge. And they're really almost one and the same, but they're separate entities underneath the same ministry. And an incredible ministry, teaching, launching, planting churches all over Asia, not just in the Philippines. They graduate hundreds from their Bible college every year. And the expectation is, where are you going to start in ministry? And so if you want a real blessing, look at Global Surge, online, and the amount of people they're reaching, the amount of youth they're reaching. The numbers are in the tens and hundreds of thousands that they reach. And so we're very grateful to have met them and partner with them. And so what I did was I went to 4 locations of their Bible college and taught pastors, seminary students, and other Christian leaders about addiction with the book. And we had several hundred, I think there was 325, if I remember correctly, that we taught within those 2 weeks. And of course, Pastor Jansen and his wife Hannah were with me the whole time. They have been our contact in the Philippines from the beginning. They were the people I met in Sanford, North Carolina, who invited me to come. And even though they weren't coordinating it, they came and they stayed with me the whole time. They have family in Manila. The same time we were there, their son-in-law was planting a new church, so they were able to be there for the first Sunday of that. And they're just very critical to DBR's work in the Philippines. Very grateful for all that they did and coming and just spending a couple of weeks traveling and attending the seminar and serving. And so we look forward to continuing our work there. In 2016 to 2019, we taught just a little over 1,000 pastors in the Philippines, and they are continuing to carry that message. Those seeds are planted, and they're out there helping people. And so the combination between Nicaragua and Philippines, over 1,500 pastors have been trained by DBR in just those 4 years. So we're looking forward to returning to that work and continuing it. And we know that God's in control, and we're grateful that these things are making a difference. And so, but again, there's more opportunity. The desire is there. They're waiting, we're waiting. And so as soon as God opens the doors, we're going to continue those ministries, and we're going to continue serving in Nicaragua and the Philippines. So let me shift at this point, if I can, from the foreign missions work. So I talked about all our work in Belize, Nicaragua, and Philippines. And I said I have some testimonies that I would like to share. And so this is our domestic work. And you say, well, if you haven't been traveling to the mission field, what have you been doing? And the answer is a lot, because addiction issues across the board are on the rise in the mission field, but also in the U.S. And so we've continued to be involved, and we've been continued to be used. And so I want to share a couple of testimonies that will speak for themselves, if they will. And I do have some comments afterwards about, things that we've seen and what we see on the rise. So one of those is, because I printed these so I could read them to you. One of them is a situation that we got involved with towards the later part of last year, and have seen some very good results from it. And so this one, and she said that I could use her name, so I'm going to, but I'm going to leave out some of the other names that she had in there just for the sake of what we do as our ministry. But her name was Kim, and this is what she wrote me. She said, you know how sometimes a moment in time or a decision made will impact your life forever. I made one of those decisions December 4th, 2020. It was scary and I felt vulnerable. I was at my rock bottom. I was about to lose everything I loved. My family had had enough. So I picked up my phone and called my brother. I was lost. I needed his help. After I after I spilled my guts, crying the entire time, my brother calmly said, I have a guy, he says. His name is Steve Horn with DBR Ministries. My brother said, Kim, you remember him. He helped save our son's life. I said, of course I do. What a blessing and support he was in helping my nephew get his life back. So my brother told me, that's who you need to call. You can trust him. He can help you. She says, so I did. This man I didn't know sat on the phone with me, listened to my story, and helped me make a plan to get my life back. This plan was not going to be easy, he said, but it was going to get me back on the road to what God wanted for my life. By December 8th, and this is just 4 days later, I was on a plane from Texas to North Carolina to start my journey of recovery with my family and Steve's support. It is now 87 days later, and none of the people who started this journey with me have left me alone. I am forever changed and renewed because of that decision to pick up the phone. I know I can count on the same great advice and support for as long as I need it. I will never be alone. I want to thank you, Steve, for picking up the phone and guiding me through. I will forever be grateful. Sincerely, your friend, Kim. So that was just incredible opportunity for our ministry, not just here locally. It turned out that we had an opportunity that was in another state, somewhere else in the country, and were able to effectively help somebody get clean and sober, get their life back, and get their life on track. And as much as I appreciate, Kim's gratitude, and I'm grateful for her for just listening and trusting the guidance and the things that I was able to provide, we know that God worked in her life, and he worked in her heart, and he provided that opportunity. We also know she made the decisions to follow God's will, and so we've seen a great outcome. And she says she's 87, days sober. That was wrote a few days ago. So she's reached that pinnacle of 90 days of recovery. And one of the other things that took place, and I shared this with her recently because I didn't share it up front, but it ties in with when Greg Cox passed away. And in my life, whenever I've had extreme difficult challenges, God has always provided an opportunity to help someone. And with the timing of what happened, when I got the call from Greg's family that he had passed away, it was on December 4th. And a couple hours later, I get a call from a woman I don't know that I've never met looking for help. And I believed from that point on that she was going to make it, strictly because of the fact that God doesn't waste divine appointments. And I believe that was a divine appointment. And I'm incredibly grateful to be just a part of her success and being used by God to help another person just share the message of recovery and another life taken back from the grips of the evil nature of recovery. And so that's one of the testimonies from this year, and certainly one of the ones that I wanted to share with you. That's what your support has kept us around for, to help. Nobody knows when the crisis is going to happen. It's just going to happen. And we have to be available when it does. There's another person who I worked with this year. And I asked him, excuse me, if he would share a little bit about what our ministry meant to him. And again, I'm going to read for you the testimony. I just reminded, during our banquet, this is the time when I step aside and just take a chair. And people come up to the podium and they give their testimony. This year I'm reading it for them. So I hope that what you hear is what God did in their life. It says, before working with Steve, in addiction recovery, my life was headed downward and everything was going with it. My family, my livelihood, my spiritual life, anything that would make life worthwhile, my addiction was ruining. I knew all of this and decided to do everything I could to stop it. I made firm resolutions to quit, read books about my addiction and followed their suggestions, made even firmer resolutions to quit. Nothing seemed to work. For years, I went through the cycle of try, fail, try something different, and fail again. Doing everything in my power, the longest sobriety I could muster was only a few days of frantic white knuckling. All the while, my marriage was deteriorating, and I was becoming more and more harmful to those around me as I receded deeper into my addiction. Considering myself somewhat of high willpower, I was absolutely baffled as to why I couldn't stop doing something that I knew was ruining not only my life, but the lives of those around me as well. When I first called Steve, I didn't have much faith that I could ever recover. I was desperate, and reaching out was just another thing I was going to try, and at that point was expecting to fail. Not in my wildest imagination could I have guessed what was in store for me. After working with him in addiction recovery for only a few short months, I knew beyond a shadow of a doubt that my life was on entirely new footing. Before I knew it, lengths of sobriety that I had not thought, or I had thought impossible to achieve, were coming and going without a thought. And not just sobriety, but true recovery. Steve helped guide me through fixing the deep issues and patterns that had created the perfect storm for addiction in my life. As he continues to work with me, I am moving far beyond the sobriety I had initially been searching for. My relationship with my family has deepened in ways I could never have foreseen. I have found a spiritual life which had previously eluded me. And on the whole, my life is now headed up in the right direction. For years, I had tried everything I could think of to recover from my addiction, but it was Steve's experience, strength, and hope that was the missing key to my recovery. The key that made my old way of life completely unrecognizable to the way I live now. Truly, my gratitude for Steve sharing the gift of recovery with me cannot be expressed. So that's another testimony this past year of where your support was put to work. When our ministry continues to exist, it's available for people when they need it the most. And so obviously that was a person who needed help. And it's the same kind of scenario. At some point, I get a phone call. Our information is out there. it's available. It's pretty widespread at this point. And so I will get an email, I'll get a phone call from somebody and offer them the solution. They have to pick up the tools and do something with them. So not everybody that I work with succeeds, but most of the time I have to say that's based on what they do with what they're given. And if they want to follow directions, it works. If they don't, it won't. And so this was a man who chose to listen, follow directions, take the action, and now he's living a new life. And he was raised in a private Christian school. I was going to say denomination, but I'm going to. But he was raised in a Christian school, but he just left for addiction and just rebelled. And to watch him feel the restoration of his relationship with God through recovery, and then just watch him grow, has just been an incredible blessing. And continue to have contact with him on a regular basis. I have one other testimony that I'd like to share, and this is it's fairly concise, but it's kind of along the same lines of what we just read. So it says he sent me this text actually one night, and I asked him if I could share it. He said, "Good evening, Steve. I hope it's not too late for a message. I just wanted to send you a quick line before bed to tell you that my work with and his sponsor is fruitful, and there is respect and trust there that is helping me on my path. Also to tell you that I'm very grateful for the investment of your time, consideration, experience, and wisdom you have placed in me. You told me it was possible never to be back where I was at my bottom again. At that time, I couldn't imagine a life free of the threat of that hell, but I trusted it, and it is true. For myself and on behalf of all the lives you have touched and given time to, thank you so much, and God bless." And so this was another person firm within the grip of addiction who was just losing everything and decided to reach out for help. And as he said, I shared with them that, when a person reaches their bottom, it can be their last bottom. They don't have to do it again. Some do, but it doesn't have to be that way. And so I think that for him, he was just looking for that glimmer of hope. And he's done well. And I appreciate him and continue to have contact with him as well. So I wanted to then speak about 20 minutes we have left on this. I'm trying to go for about an hour, about some things that I've seen in addiction in this country. Some things you may not know. I know when I sent the message out in the letter, I proposed the question, what is the fastest growing addiction right now? And what is the effect of the pandemic on addiction? It's not something that you're going to get on major news networks. Whatever, they're talking about is more of the virus and what it's doing culturally. And one of the things I did recently was I talked to the Rotary Club in Sanford, and they asked the same question: can you come share with us the impact of the pandemic on addiction? It was interesting as I spoke about it, the questions that came back were things like, what is the impact on children? Has there been any impact on prescription drugs and things of that nature? And there was a lot of various questions that, quite honestly, I would just say, well, I don't know. There's so many aspects of the effects of the pandemic on our culture that I don't know what every one of them is. But I do believe that I have a pretty good sense of what it is on addiction. And so I want to share with you a couple of things that you probably, I'm going to say you haven't heard, or if you did, it was on a limited basis. So one of the first things that we saw was the effects of getting stimulus checks. And a couple things that I heard, and one of these is practically firsthand, people walking out of treatment when they were already there when they got the stimulus check. and also other people certainly not using it to pay their bills. It was just a fat check for a big party, is what it came down to. And so while the stimulus checks, I'm sure, helped a number of people and were beneficial across the board, the impact on addiction was negative, and it just promoted and prompted dysfunctional decisions. I mean, if you've got an addict brain and you get a big check, there's only one thing that's going to happen, and that's what I heard happening. And so some of those things were taking place. I'm sure it happened on a much broader scale than what I know of, but even just in this general area where I'm at, that's what was happening. So I know it was happening on a large scale. The other thing that we came across was there's a regional detox in our area that I've taken a lot of people to over the years. And one of the people that went in there and came out recently told me on the way out that the staff there is saying that they're busier than they have ever been. And they've been around there for decades. And so that is a true indicator of the results of what's going on. And another part of that is you would kind of expect that since we were having such a problem with opiates, that it would have escalated the opiate problem. Probably has increased it, but that's not what I'm seeing. And again, I'm not trying to say I got the whole picture. I'm just telling you what I've seen and what I'm aware of. And what I've seen more is people that are borderline on the edge of becoming a drug addict or an alcoholic going over the edge. That's what I'm seeing. And so I'm seeing a lot of people with alcohol who were drinkers and had been drinkers for a long time and had been heavy drinkers, had problems, and then the pandemic hit. And some of them lost their jobs, and some of them spent a lot more time in isolation. And that's all it took to increase that enough to become full-blown alcoholism. And that's what I'm seeing. So, surprisingly enough that there's a big influence of alcohol consumption and addiction that's coming out of this pandemic. The other one, and I would say that every area of addiction, I think, has increased across the board. People in isolation are going to increased isolation are going to increase their habits. I mean, that's just a matter of fact. If most people who have a problem with drinking usually try to hide that problem, well, they don't have to hide it as much. They can do more. And so they can more quickly become addicted to alcohol. And so people that were on the edge, crossing the line. And so I got a call, and I'm going to give this testimony before I go to the next subject, talking about what I think is the most prevalent and increased addiction of 2020. I had a call from a young man mid last year, and it wasn't for him. It was in regards to his father. And this young man was a husband and a father himself, young family, young kids, and he was actually in ministry. And his dad was a bivocational minister, so he had a church that he pastored, but he also had a secular vocation. And he was calling in regards to his dad, and began to tell me the story that his dad had lost the secular vocation to work that he had, and it really put them in a bad situation with him and his wife. And he commented about how he saw his dad began to change during that time, and he saw changes in him that he was concerned about. The family saw changes they were concerned about. They kind of chalked it up to, being discouraged or, maybe depressed about just the loss of work and those kinds of things. But the truth is that the father was using an app on his phone to contact women. And this is one of the things that we're seeing rapidly increasing in our culture and in the addiction area. And what happened with him was he eventually met somebody through that app, arranged a meeting, snuck away from his family to a undisclosed location, and had an affair. And then he was caught. And the old idea about I'm not hurting anybody but myself certainly doesn't fly, not in that situation. Because you're talking about a man who has a ministry. He hurt his church, he hurt his family, he hurt his marriage, he hurt a lot of people. But he's not a drunk or a drug addict. What he did, and I believe this is the same thing I was just talking about with alcohol. I don't think that people slip on a banana peel and land in adultery. It doesn't work that way. He was already doing something. He was already predisposed. There was something going on there, but it probably had not crossed the line into what we would consider an addictive lifestyle. And yet, the effect of the pandemic and losing the job was the push that he needed. I have a feeling this man was engaged in the use of pornography before any of this took place and probably escalated with that. But that was a phone call that came to my phone. And I was able to help the son, offered my assistance to the father. It was never taken. But I certainly was able to talk with his son and suggest some good courses of action for the family. And so what is the fastest growing addiction in 2020 is sexual addiction. And that's what I've seen. And if you think about it, it does actually make sense because all of that is done in isolation. Alcohol you can use out in the open, drugs marginally out in the open, but everything related to sexual addiction is done in isolation. And these apps that are available now, they provide opportunity to push people over the edge. And what I mean by that is, if you had that issue in the past and you were trying to meet someone, you could go to a bar, you could go maybe a few other places. But typically, you would go out to a bar and try to meet somebody that you could engage in your sexual addiction with. And now you don't have to leave your home, and you can meet hundreds, literally hundreds of people. And it's just incredibly vile, and it's incredibly harmful to people. And so, whereas I used to get probably 20% of my phone calls would be for those issues, and 80% was alcohol and drugs. In 2020, it was the opposite. About 20% were for alcohol and drugs, and I have gotten an increased number of phone calls, either from the person or from the family members dealing with sexual addiction issues. There's no indication that that's going to decrease. And so the destruction that that's causing is, literally horrendous. I mean, you can imagine if you had an alcohol problem and you're married and you have children and what that's going to do. And it probably could drag out over an extended period of time. But you can, in one day, destroy your family and your life through sexual addiction. And the Bible says that. It has some warnings in Proverbs that talk about that. It says, if a man steals, he'll pay back 7 times what he took if he's caught. But it says, but a man who commits adultery has no sense. He sins against his own soul. And so the destruction factor of all of this is horrendous. And so that's something that we need to pray about. You may not know the people, and I may not know exactly who they are. There's lots of people out there, but I think it's something that as Christians who are focused on recovery, we need to be in prayer about and supporting. And our ministry is prepared to be able to help people with those issues. I have developed my resources for years. When I first got here to North Carolina 14 years ago, the first thing I did was spend several days on the phone calling and finding out where the resources were. And within those days, I had found practically everything within a 100-mile radius. And that has continued to expand. I have a whole shelf on my bookshelf that's nothing but resources, so that when somebody calls me, I can pull that resource and connect them with something. I had that phone call today, somebody that I've never talked to before, who got my number from somebody else, the wife of a person who has an alcohol problem. most likely pushed over the edge in 2020, and trying to find help as a family member for Al-Anon, and didn't know where the meetings were, but I know where the meetings are. And so I was able to tell her specifically where they are, what time they are, give her some contact information, and then also offer her the book that I wrote on codependency, The Third Option. And so we are a ministry that is prepared pretty much for whatever comes our way. I don't try to be the answer to all things. What I try to do is make sure that I know where all those things are, and so I can connect people with them. And so that's why, we need to continue as a ministry. We're going to see this in 2021. It's going to continue. The needs are going to be there. They're ongoing. And so part of the effort of all of this is to fund our ministry. And ultimately, that's what we're trying to do. We would have been having our banquet. We would have given this presentation and handed out pledge cards, and people would have gave. Last year at our dinner, we received enough to fund the ministry for the entire year. We were very blessed in that way. And so we're trying to, as much as we can, recreate that. At this point, I don't know when the foreign missions work will continue, so we're not actively doing fundraising for missions trips. As soon as that returns, we will. But we still have our operating budget. And so we still want to be available. We still need support. We sent the letters out. People who filled out pledge cards last year got a letter with their pledge card in it. And we would be so grateful and blessed if you were able to renew that pledge and continue to give this year. You can send that back to us. The other thing you can do is you can go on our website at dbrministries.com. And if you look at the donate tab, there's a section that talks about this year's budget. And then it gives some suggested giving increments, the same thing that we do at our dinner. And what we ask people to do is make a commitment to give in March and then October later in the year. And so we'll invoice people in October with the contact information and to give twice. What that does is it carries us through. So through those commitments and what we had at the dinner last year, the pledges for October, we were able to invoice then. And again, it carries us through the whole year. So that's what I'm asking you to do, encouraging you to do, is to support our ministry. The budget that we're trying to raise is $30,000. And while that may seem like a huge amount of money, I would ask you to consider what ministry organization having the kind of impact that we're having globally has a budget of $30,000, which includes a modest amount for me for my salary. And so it comes out to $2,500 a month. And for that, we have everything. It provides all the transportation, the operating cost. And again, small amount for me. I make it all up through electrical contracting, doing work that way. But that's a pretty small budget for an organization like ours. But if you go to our website, look at the donate tab, and it will show you a chart that shows you how easy it is for us to get to that number. And all we need is for people to go there and choose one of those giving increments and then donate and give to our ministry. There's also a tab there, a link that you can click. It says that it's a PayPal link, but if you click on it, you'll have a choice of a debit or credit card. And so you can give in that way as well. So those of you who supported or attended the 2019 and 2020 dinners received mail outs with our prayer card and a request to donate. So I ask you to prayerfully consider that, and we definitely need your support. Again, go to our website, dbrministries.com, and click the donate tab, and you can donate, or you can send a check to us, and it's at P.O. Box 279, and that's in Sanford, North Carolina 27331. And again, just make the check out to DBR Ministries, P.O. Box 279, Sanford, North Carolina 27331. My number, and I'm going to give it because I give it to everybody, it's 919-478-5600. 6237. If there's anything that I can help you with, anybody that needs help, feel free to give them my number. You can give my cell phone number to anybody you want. That's how we operate our ministry. So I appreciate you attending, as we will, the live feed in lieu of the banquet this year. Appreciate all your support, and God bless you. I'm going to pray as we finish. Lord, I thank you for this time and for all that we talked about here, the testimonies especially, Lord. And we know that the needs are still there, and I believe they'll increase. And so I pray that you'll bless this ministry. You'll provide everything that's needed. Bless our donors, those who give generously, Lord. Bless them for their generosity and just the joy that they can have in being a part of what we're doing. We thank you for all of this in the name of Jesus. Amen. Again, thank you for your time, and God bless.